Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to spend some time with me on the video today. We're going to be talking about why plastic worms, which is probably arguably the #1 fish catcher in the history of bass fishing, do not work in the wintertime. It's sort of been a mystery for a lot of people out there, so I'm going to give you guys my theory on that, why they just don't work very good in cold water. And we're going to talk about that and maybe counter that with some things that do work good in cold water that are very similar to that. Also, guys, before we get started, I want to remind you, we're in the middle of jerkbait season right now. And one of my favorite colors of jerkbaits for the last year and a half has been this matte finish megabass HT Tennessee shad. This is a flat finish. This used to come in a metallic. But guys, I just catch a ton of fish on this matte finish here, HT Tennessee shad, one of my favorite wintertime colors, especially with this little puff of chartreuse on the belly here. So I'll put my megabass jerkbait link in the description, and you can just scroll down and look for the matte HT Tennessee shad. It's a really good color for the wintertime, especially on those cloudy days or low light days. It works really good. Okay guys, plastic worms, you don't hear anyone using them in the wintertime. It's like plastic worms, ever since they came out in the 50s and 60s, and up even till today, they're probably the most consistent bass catcher of all time. Whatever worm it may be. It can be a Texas rig, ribbon tail like this Zoom Old Monster, or it can be a trick worm, or it can be, Cinco or whatever. But Texas rig soft plastics in the wintertime, you just can't catch many fish on them. And to be honest with you guys, I've thought about this for a long time. I don't really have the answer to it, to be quite honest with you. I've got some theories on it, but my theories sort of do not equate to the reality of the situation. So I'm going to sort of give you guys my opinion on that. Now, one of the things about bass is there's so much that we don't understand about them. And it's okay, because I can tell you right now, guys, one of the things in fishing that you sort of need to accept and embrace is the fact that you don't want to know everything about the fish. If you knew everything about them, it wouldn't hold the appeal that fishing does. So things like this, what we're talking about, why bass don't bite plastic worms in the wintertime, you don't really have to have an explanation to it. It just sort of is what it is. But it's sort of fun to theorize, because we can't really crawl into a bass's mind to ask them why they don't like a plastic worm in the wintertime, but they like a jerkbait or an Alabama rig or a spoon, something like that. It all goes back, in my theory here, to the mood and the personality of the bass. And you hear me talking about that a lot on the channel, and you probably don't hear other YouTubers ever talking about it. But it's been my experience in fishing that bass have moods and personalities just like human beings do. And the moods and the personalities and the behaviors of a bass, they change with the environmental conditions. Those environmental conditions are a combination of a lot of things. It can be water clarity, water temperature, the tint of the water, the weather conditions, during any given time, the time of year in terms of the length of the daylight hours, barometric pressure. There's just a lot of variables that determine that. But in the wintertime, for the most time, you're dealing with a combination of things. You're dealing normally with a little bit lower water than normal. You're dealing with water that's a little bit cleaner than normal, colder than normal, and and shorter daylight hours. All that type of stuff goes into that. Now, the type of bait that the fish likes in different times of the year has to do with their metabolism a lot of times. Because, for example, I have found in my own fishing that in the wintertime, bass prefer smaller stuff. And they prefer stuff that can be both moving baits and slow baits, but they prefer a smaller bait. And like in the pre-spawn time of the year, a lot of times they prefer a larger bait. Now, I'm not saying that you can't catch a fish on a Texas rig worm in the wintertime, but I can promise you, if you and I went fishing like tomorrow here in Missouri, and you put on a Texas rig worm and you fished it all day long, and I fished a jerkbait or a little swim bait or a spoon, I'd be surprised if you even get one bite. I mean, that's just the way the deal is. And a lot of it has to do with how the fish are positioned on structure, if they're suspended, how deep they are, a variety of different things. But here's one of the things that I haven't been able to figure. Let's say, for example, we're fishing in the wintertime, we're fishing a main lake point or a bluff bank or something like that. And I'm catching some fish, like on my little Blaukat throwback jig, pitching it against the bluffs or fishing it on points. Now this jig is on the bottom, hopping along the bottom, the same way that this Texas rig worm would be hopping on the bottom. Yet I may catch 20 fish in a day on my little jig, and somebody with me throwing a Texas rig worm is not going to get a bite. So that is just sort of, it is what it is. You can't really overanalyze it, overthink it, anything, because you would think in terms of the bass biting something. You would think they either want like a slow bait or a moving bait, and different type of a profile. Now I've even tried different profiles of worms. I've tried straight tail worms, I've tried ribbon tails, I've tried curly tails, different type of worms. I just can't hardly get a bite on it. Now it's a little bit different if you're fishing down south. If you're fishing like in Florida or Grass Lakes where the water temperatures in 50s, yeah, you can still get a few bites on a Texas rig. But I'm telling you what, guys, if you're fishing a man-made impoundment where the water temperatures in the 40s, you're going to struggle to get any bites on a Texas rig worm. It's just one of those mysteries of bass fishing that we don't really understand. So, point of the video, I don't know if it's pointless or not on this video, but this is one that I'm stumped about. I feel pretty confident in my ability to accurately assess why bass don't bite or do bite certain lures, but I got to tell you guys, I'm sort of at a loss on this Texas rig worm deal because, again, I've changed colors, I've changed profiles, I've changed sizes, and I can put on a jig and get a lot of bites, but I put on a Texas rig worm and I can't get hardly any bites. And vice versa, if you went fishing with me like in July, say we go down to Grand Lake in July and we're fishing deep points or brush piles, I'll catch a bunch of fish on a Texas rig worm and probably I can't get a bite on a jig. So it's just one of those things about fishing, one of those wonderful things that makes it just a challenge every time we go out. So anyway, guys, hope you guys are well. We'll talk later. See you.